Hello and welcome. My name is Lynn, or LV Handcrafted, here on YouTube, and today I am continuing my video series on playing with the Kendra's Card Challenge number 8 using cat scrappiness supplies. And with this iteration, because this will be the third time that I'm playing along with the challenge, I'm actually mixing and matching between different paper pads. Usually in the past, when I've played along with this challenge, I found it really easy to just stick to a single paper pad because paper pads are designed to be coordinated together. But I thought I would try something a little bit different and not only um, approach this card challenge in bite-sized pieces, so cutting down a couple sheets here, cutting down a couple sheets there, making a few of the card sketches instead of sitting down and trying to make all 17 cards and choosing all of my papers and everything in advance. And it's actually worked out quite well. I'm really surprised actually. And what the last sheet of 6x6 paper that I chose was actually from the Reindeer Games paper pad that just released. So not only did I have no way of knowing in advance, what the papers would be, but I knew for certain there would probably be something that would work with the cuts left over from where I left off on this challenge. And sure enough, I found one that I think went really, really well. Now, what helped was that, there are a couple things that really help with having papers from different paper pads, but ultimately being able to use everything together. One is that the papers are double-sided. So that actually gave me a lot more options when it came to actually picking which side to use. So that helped quite a bit. And also, as I was picking and choosing, since I knew I wanted to mix and match between paper pads, I stuck to choosing patterns that were a little bit more general purpose and not specifically themed. I think a couple of the papers that I chose in my first video were from Cat's Meow, and those were fairly thematic. But being double-sided, there was always the backside, which generally, for most paper pads, at least the ones that are well designed, if something's super themed on one side, usually the other side has a pattern that is just a little bit more general purpose. So that all of those things kind of help to make it such that even though I didn't have all of my papers selected at the very beginning and I was just crafting, I started this challenge back in was it October even? And so it's nice and manageable to just kind of go with the flow and just make a couple of decisions as I was progressing along the challenge. And so I do have multiple videos. The last one will actually be here on the Cat Scrappiness channel, and it'll actually be airing on Christmas Eve. So stay tuned for that. And then in the description box below, I will leave a link to each video in the series, and then I'll annotate which sketches were covered in each of those videos, and which videos actually feature cutting the 6 paper sheets of pattern paper. So for this set of cards, I'm also using the Reindeer Games stamp and die set, as well as the Sentiments, which is a separate stamp set, as well as some of the nested shape dies. This one is the cross stitch circle nested shape dies, and I find having a variety of nested shape dies really, really useful, because you just never know, what size you'll need for your project, and it's a really nice way to just frame and create a little backdrop for your focal image. And I find that it can often sort of take the place of having to build out a full scene. So, for example, here I just have the one reindeer stamped and colored, and he's not part of a scene or anything, but because I've got the doubled nested circles, he still is framed, and it just makes him a little bit more prominent, and and it feels like he's a little bit larger on the card. So I find nested shape dies are fantastic for that. And I really love the font on this sentiment pad because it's interesting. Everything is the same height, so I think it's kind of cool. But the letters are so you don't have any letters that sort of drop below the baseline, and you don't have any letters that are taller than others. So I think that's kind of cool. I like that. I like that blocky look to it. And the sentiments are, some of them are a little bit punny to go with reindeers, but a lot of them are very general holiday greetings. So really, really versatile set of sentiments. And then I've got the joy sentiment, which has the sentiment as well as the shadow layer. So that's one of the new releases from, or all of those things are part of the new release, Christmas release from Scrappiness. And so moving right along to the next sketch here. So this one features the a block or square block from, I think that's pattern paper B. And so you can see I did choose a wood grain, which is really, I feel like, very neutral in some ways. So it's a pattern that's pretty easy to work with, and it works for a variety of themes and occasions as well. So I'm making holiday cards, and wood grain fits in perfectly well as a nice little backdrop. And as I mentioned, the papers are double-sided, and in the case of the wood grain, which came from the lumberyard paper pad, it's all wood grain. So the back is wood grain too, but it could be, and I can't remember in this exact instance if it's the case, but sometimes you'll have a lighter wood on one side and then a darker wood grain on the other side. So it's kind of nice to have that versatility. And the sheet that I'm cutting down here is actually part of one of the Christmas slimline paper pads, which I really like the dimension of these slimline paper pads because it's actually larger than what you would need for a standard size, if there is such a thing as a standard size for slimline cards. But it's so well thought of because that size is really convenient for getting the most out of your papers. So the dimension is actually 4 inches by 10 3/4. And I think the standard slimline card is, at least the size that I cut them to, is 3.5 by 8.5. So 4 by 10 3/4 gives you a matte layer, even a full matte if you didn't want any of your card base to show on your slimline, and then a little extra if you needed it for maybe backing a sentiment or on a separate card. But the 4-inch width is really perfect because if you also make USA 2 size cards like I do, then that 4 inches is, for me anyways, the mat size that I often use. 4 inches by 5 1/4. So from one sheet of the slimline paper, I can actually get 2 mat layers for 2 USA size 2 cards. So it's really fantastic. The slimline papers have been sized so that they're useful for your regular USA 2 size cards too. So I think that's really cool. It just makes it easier, more versatile to use, and it makes those papers go a little bit longer as well. So really, really happy to see that. So I took a sheet from there and just added some additional mats and layers behind my pattern papers. And with Kendra's card challenge, you'll notice in the sketches that there's the blocks of indicating which pattern papers labeled A through F are meant to be included on that sketch. And then there's a lot of blocks that are in various gray tones. And that's where you are meant to kind of bring from your stash some additional options and choices of backgrounds. And so sometimes I'll just use solid color cardstock, but I find it's a good opportunity to bring in some additional papers as well. So for this card, because I'm trying to make a holiday card and I already have the little strip of red, I thought bringing in some of the greens of Christmas would help to really start to theme this a little bit more strongly towards the holidays and towards Christmas. So I like that her sketches are not so jam-packed with the 6x6 papers that you initially cut down, but there's some opportunity there's quite a lot of opportunity to really change and adapt the card design for whatever occasion you're making it for. So especially if you're approaching the challenge the way I've done with this one, where I'm picking and choosing my papers as I go, and I'm mixing and matching between paper pads as well. So I'm picking some fairly neutral themed patterns where I feel like it's a safe bet to be combined with to be decided future papers. At least towards the beginning, I was definitely very cognizant of that. By the time I got down to picking my last sheet from the Reindeer Games paper pad, that was the last paper choice I needed to make. So for that one, I could go a little bit more themed and not have to worry, so long as because everything before it I chose to be rather neutral, nothing too heavily themed. And I'm mixing and matching my stamped and colored images between Santa's Helpers and Reindeer Games. I love this pairing here because it kind of looks like they're doing a little bit of a gift exchange, because they're both holding gifts and they feel like they're scaled pretty well to work together on a scene. And I love that between the two sets you have characters that some are facing left, some are facing right, so that makes it really fun to start to imagine them in a scene together. And with some of the sequins, I like to just pour them out and sometimes use them selectively, the way I've done on that card. So you don't always have to use your shaker bits for shaker cards. You can just use them as individual embellishments as well. I hope that you have been enjoying this series. I have one last one, and as I mentioned, it will be here and it will air on December 24th. Until then, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.